Have you ever heard of the RCMP? Most likely, as they are some of the most iconic Canadian police in history. So you may have already heard of them, or even seen them around before, but do you know why they exist? Well, it all started during the ministry of John A. Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister. This decision was made under the fear that after the Cypress Hill Massacre, the First Nations peoples may kill American traders, which would then lead to the U.S. military being deployed to protect their people. Macdonald's greatest fear, perhaps, was that the Americans would not leave afterwards. In order to prevent that from happening, he created a group called the Northwest Mounted Police. He wanted them to be mounted because horses are large animals and thus would make them more intimidating. The NWMP were deployed to the Alberta border in 1874. Their deployment was also known as the March West. This is because when they were deployed to the plains, they were ordered to go west to deal with the whiskey traders. They went and ran out of food supplies quickly for the horses, as they had assumed that there would be grass for the horses to graze on. Many of the horses starved or died from the cold. When they finally made it to Fort Whoop-Up, where the whiskey traders had been staying, they were prepared for confrontation after traveling a total of 900 miles. Unfortunately, the whiskey traders knew they were coming and had since fled. There still stayed a few whom the NWMP quickly got arrested. After the NWMP settled in, there arose another issue: how to deal with the local indigenous groups. Originally, the mounted police and the First Nations peoples could stay peaceful, and there were rules in place allowing the two groups to stay peaceful, one of which stated that the indigenous people were allowed to go wherever they wanted. Later, the First Nations began to steal horses as riding by horseback was a lot faster and helped enable their hunting expeditions. In 1885, the NWMP were ordered to enforce an apartheid-like pass system in which First Nations peoples could only leave their area if they had a pass and had to be back before their pass expired. The NWMP were aware that this went against Treaty 7 with the Blackfoot people, allowing them to go wherever they wanted. But in 1893, when Commissioner Herchmer tried to order the NWMP to stop enforcing the law, he was quickly overruled by the Department of Indian Affairs. In 1881, the Canadian government started to work on the Canadian Pacific Railway. They hired Chinese working immigrants to build it with the hope of opening the Northwest Territories up for settlement. They also, however, wanted to move the First Nations peoples to the north of the railway to cut them off from the U.S. border. The First Nations peoples were not happy with people coming through their land and building a railway. They would often protest by disrupting the construction and stealing company horses. The NWMP arrested many, and the government cut back the rations shared among the First Nations peoples, forcing them to leave through underhanded methods such as starvation. When the railway was nearing completion, the NWMP also arrested many of the unpaid riding workers. Along with immigration came housing, a higher population, and industrialization. The larger population caused there to be a growing range of demands of the mounted police, as the NWMP struggled with meeting those demands. Seeing as the Northwest Mounted Police had already fulfilled their duties of establishing settlement in the Northwest Territories, the NWMP would be disbanded as there was nothing more for them to do.
Sorry, eh? They found what?
Gold.
However, then came the Klondike Gold Rush, and the NWMP was redeployed there to protect Canada's sovereignty and manage prospectors. After the Klondike Gold Rush in 1900, the mounted police began to expand their networks further into the north of the Arctic Circle, and in 1903, they established the first Arctic Police Post. Back in 1897, a detachment of the NWMP had come to London for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee to represent Canada, and by this point, the NWMP had become internationally famous. So, in 1904, they were granted the prefix Royal, making them the Royal Northwest Mounted Police, or the RNWMP. The RNWMP also became involved in the First World War in 1914. This is because, during the war, the government had grown increasingly concerned about immigrants betraying Canada for their home country, or when citizens with American, Irish, or German backgrounds crossed over the border. So, they tried to get the Federal Dominion Police to keep an eye out and manage things for them. Before the war, the Dominion Police would usually hire private detectives to find things out for them, but with Canada's small amount of resources during the war, they shifted many of their responsibilities onto local police forces, including the RNWMP. The RNWMP's initial wartime duties were to pay closer attention to immigrant activity and border security. The force was then temporarily increased to 1,200 men and investigated rumors about conspiracies. They also used secret agents and officers to cross-examine townspeople without alerting anyone too much. With the regular police officer responsibilities and the new security role, the RNWMP's job became overwhelming, so the Canadian government merged the Albertan and Saskatchewan Mounted Police to create the Provincial Police Forces. This also gave the Mounted Police access to 80 mounted police posts. Right after the merging, the two mounted police groups, they got split up where 738 of them were sent overseas in 1918 to form A Squadron. 186 of them were deployed to Siberia to help British forces involved in the Russian Civil War. This left 303 mounted police left in Canada to focus on protecting Canada's border and allowing secret agents and undercover officer intelligence networks created early in the war to diminish. In 1920, the RNWMP and the Dominion Police merged to form the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP for short.